Every Assassin's Creed game has that one side mission that makes you want to throw your controller through a wall. From mindless collectathons with zero payoff, to escort missions that feel like babysitting a suicidal wagon, to puzzles so obtuse you need a PhD in 16th century French poetry to solve them. Today, I'm breaking down the absolute worst side mission from every single game in the franchise, starting with the one that started it all, Assassin's Creed. The original Assassin's Creed is patient zero for everything wrong with Ubisoft's approach to side content, and I can prove it with 2 words: flag collecting. The game scattered 420 flags across Jerusalem, Acre, Damascus, and the kingdom in between. 420 collectibles with 0 narrative context, 0 new abilities, and 0 rewards. You picked them up, your completion percentage went up by a fraction, and that was it. Here's the thing. These flags weren't hidden behind clever puzzles or interesting platforming challenges. They were just sitting on rooftops and in alleyways. Your options were either spend dozens of hours doing exhaustive sweeps across 4 massive cities, or pull up a guide and follow it like a grocery list. Both are terrible. And the reward for finding every single one? Nothing. An achievement maybe, depending on your platform. But no secret weapon, no hidden cutscene, no special outfit, just the quiet knowledge that you wasted your time, which is, not ideal. But here's where it gets important. This wasn't just a bad side activity, this was the template. Ubisoft looked at 420 flags that offered players literally nothing and thought, yeah, let's build on this. Every bloated map icon, every pointless collectible in the next 15 years of this franchise traces its DNA back to this exact moment. The flags were the original sin, and the community still talks about them. Over 15 years later, flag collecting remains the go-to example when players discuss where Assassin's Creed's bloat problem began. But if you think collecting flags for no reward is bad, wait until Assassin's Creed 2 asks you to punch people to death, except you're not allowed to actually kill them. Assassin's Creed 2, Ezio Auditore is one of the most lethal characters in gaming history. He can kill a man with a hidden blade in under a second, counterattack 3 guards simultaneously, and drop onto a target from a bell tower without making a sound. So naturally, the game asks him to gently punch cheaters. The beat-up events are a set of 5 side missions spread across Florence, San Gimignano, Forlì, and Venice, where angry spouses hire you to track down adulterers and beat them up. Not kill them, not stab them, punch them with your fists. The thing Ezio is famously bad at because he has a sword. Here's where it gets complicated. The missions don't just restrict you to non-lethal combat, they actively punish you for being too good at it. Promiscuity Knocks places the target in a heavily guarded area near water, and the knockback from your punches can send him stumbling right into the canal. The game counts that as a kill. Mission failed. You punched a guy too hard near a puddle. Philanderer on the roof is somehow worse. You're fighting this guy on a narrow rooftop, and if you use anything other than counters, your combo attacks can knock him clean off the edge. He falls, he dies, you fail. So you're standing on a rooftop in Renaissance Italy, the most dangerous assassin alive, carefully tapping a man with your knuckles, like you're checking if bread is done. The optimal strategy the community figured out: hire mercenaries to distract the guards, then slowly counterpunch the target while nothing interesting happens. That's it. The entire challenge these missions were built around gets trivialized by spending a few florins on some guys with swords. 5 missions across 4 cities, and the difficulty never escalates through actual mechanical depth. It escalates through environmental hazards. Rooftops get narrower, water gets closer, guards get more numerous, but the core gameplay loop stays the same. Don't accidentally kill the guy you're supposed to hurt, which is, not ideal, but at least Ezio only had to deal with fistfights on rooftops. Brotherhood introduced a side activity that made players question their sanity on an entirely different level: Assassin's Creed. Brotherhood, Ezio Auditore da Firenze, Master Assassin, leader of the Roman Brotherhood, liberator of an entire city from Borgia control, and apparently also a delivery boy. Brotherhood introduced a shop quest system that, on paper, sounds like a cool idea. You buy up commercial enterprises across Rome, build a network of businesses, and generate passive income while you're off doing actual assassin stuff. Strategic economic domination. Sounds great. Here's the thing though. What it actually involved was personally sourcing specific materials, physically carrying them across the city, and hand-delivering them to shopkeepers like you're running a one-man courier service. Let me explain how this worked in practice. You'd buy a shop. The shop would then have a customer request. That request required specific items. You'd go find those items, which meant looting chests, buying from other vendors, or just wandering around Rome hoping the right material spawned. Then you'd walk back to the shop and drop them off. Then the next request would appear, and you'd do it again and again. The kicker? All this effort generated passive income that was, to put it generously, underwhelming. You'd spend 20 minutes sourcing and delivering materials for a shop that would then trickle out a handful of florins while you were away. The math simply did not justify the time investment. You could make more money pickpocketing guards on the way to the shop than the shop itself would generate in an hour. But what really makes shop quests stand out is the community response. Most bad Assassin's Creed features have at least a few defenders. Someone out there liked the flags. Someone enjoyed the beat-up events. Shop quests? 0 defenders. Nobody. The silence is deafening. It's the one feature where the entire player base collectively agreed this was a waste of everyone's time, and Ubisoft clearly got the message, because the economic simulation system was quietly taken out back and never seen again in future titles, which is, not ideal when your big new feature gets memory holed by your own studio. But if you think running errands for shopkeepers was bad, wait until Brotherhood's sequel decided to shove an entire tower defense game into an assassination simulator. Assassin's Creed Revelations. Tower defense was massive in 2011. Every studio on the planet was trying to figure out how to cram it into their game. And Ubisoft looked at their beloved stealth assassination franchise and said, yeah, let's make Ezio play Plants vs. Zombies on a rooftop. The man is in his early 50s. This is supposed to be his dignified send-off. Instead, he's placing archers on ledges, like he's arranging furniture. Den defense required you to protect your assassin headquarters from waves of attacking Templars by positioning units on rooftops and managing resources in real time. You'd place archers here, assassins there, maybe throw down a barricade, and then watch as enemies march toward your base in neat little rows like it was a completely different game. That's the problem. The entire Assassin's Creed identity is built on aggression. You pick your target, you plan your approach, you strike. Den defense flipped that on its head and forced you into a purely defensive posture, sitting back and reacting instead of hunting. The cognitive dissonance was brutal. 1 minute you're leaping across Constantinople with a hidden blade, the next you're playing a budget strategy game that feels like it was developed in a different building by a team that had never touched the rest of Revelations. And the community noticed. Players consistently described Den defense as unpolished compared to everything else in the game. The parkour was refined, the combat was tight, and then this thing just sat there, feeling half-baked and hastily bolted on. Nobody was replaying Den defense for fun. People engaged with it exactly as much as the game forced them to, and not a single second more. Here's the kicker. Nothing in the previous Assassin's Creed games suggested this was a direction anyone wanted. The franchise had been steadily refining its stealth and combat loop for 4 entries, and then Revelations just jammed in a completely unrelated genre nobody asked for. That's not experimentation. That's a detour off a cliff. But if you think a misplaced tower defense game is frustrating, wait until you see what Assassin's Creed 3 decided to do with delivery missions. Assassin's Creed 3. Connor Kenway is half Mohawk, half British, trained by assassins, fueled by revolutionary rage, and capable of killing a man with a tomahawk from 30 feet away. So naturally, Ubisoft looked at this character and said, you know what he should do? Deliver packages. The delivery request missions in Assassin's Creed 3 are 8 quests spread across Boston, the Frontier, and New York that ask you to pick up a package at one location and carry it to another location. That's it. That's the whole mission. No combat, no stealth, no puzzles, no narrative, just walking. You are a colonial-era UPS driver with a hidden blade you never get to use. Here's where it gets genuinely impressive in how empty these missions are. The locations are deliberately positioned on opposite ends of the map, meaning each delivery requires several minutes of pure travel time through forests, towns, and wilderness. And when you arrive, nothing happens. You hand over the package, someone takes it. Mission complete. There is 0 mechanical variation between any of the 8 deliveries. The first one plays exactly like the last one. The only thing that changes is which direction you're walking. It's almost like someone at Ubisoft designed these missions specifically to answer the question, what is the absolute least amount of gameplay we can put in a side mission and still technically call it a side mission? The answer apparently is navigation. Just navigation. Not even interesting navigation. You're not parkouring across rooftops or dodging patrols. You're jogging through the frontier holding a box. The community treats these missions like they don't exist, and honestly, that's generous. Veteran players universally recommend skipping them entirely, which tells you everything. When the best advice for a piece of content is don't play it, you've created something special. These feel like tutorial missions that somehow escaped into the full game and nobody noticed, or everybody noticed and nobody cared enough to remove them. The delivery requests are the purest distillation of open-world busy work the franchise ever produced. No dressing, no seasoning, just raw filler served on a paper plate. But if you think empty missions are bad, wait until Black Flag finds a way to make you hate following people. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Black Flag is widely considered one of the best Assassin's Creed games ever made. You've got a ship, cannons, an entire Caribbean to explore, and a pirate fantasy so good, it made people forget they were even playing an Assassin's Creed game. So naturally, the worst thing Ubisoft could do is rip you away from all of that and force you to slowly walk behind a guy through a crowd. And they did it constantly. Tailing missions in Black Flag required you to follow targets through streets, across rooftops, and through environmental obstacles while staying inside a very specific distance window. Too far away, instant failure, too close, detection. And the sweet spot between those two states was about as wide as a hallway, which is generous, because hallways at least let you move in more than one direction. Here's the thing. The mechanic wasn't just boring, it was actively hostile to player input. You couldn't experiment, you couldn't find creative routes, you couldn't use the tools the game spent hours teaching you. You just had to walk at the exact right speed, at the exact right distance, and pray that some random civilian didn't bump you into the detection zone. The environmental obstacles made it worse. Rooftop gaps, crowd density changes, and patrol routes all conspired to make maintaining that perfect distance functionally impossible without memorizing the layout first. Players reported hating these missions within just a few hours of starting the game. That's not gradual fatigue, that's an immediate rejection, and the community response was telling. Instead of discussing tailing missions as interesting stealth content, players shared strategies for bypassing them entirely, treating them like a disease you manage rather than gameplay you enjoy. How do I skip this is not the reaction you want to your stealth mechanics. The real tragedy is the contrast. Black Flag gave you one of the most liberating open worlds in franchise history, then kept shoving you into the most suffocating mission type imaginable. It's like being handed the keys to a sports car and then being told you can only drive it in a school zone, behind a bus, forever. But if you think restrictive mission design peaked with Black Flag, Rogue somehow found a way to make it even more frustrating. Assassin's Creed Rogue. Rogue has one of the coolest premises in the entire franchise. You're not playing as an assassin, you're playing as a Templar hunting assassins. You're the Predator now. The guy stalking from the rooftops, reading the patterns, anticipating the kill. It's the ultimate role reversal, and honestly, it should have produced some of the best side content in the series. Instead, it produced assassin interception missions. Here's the concept. Brotherhood assassins are hiding out in the world, blending into crowds and lurking on rooftops, waiting to ambush their targets. Your job is to find them and eliminate them before they complete their kill. Sounds incredible on paper. A Templar hunter tracking down assassins using their own tactics against them. That's the fantasy. But here's the thing. The assassins are hidden using the same blending and stalking mechanics you've been using all series, which means you're basically playing a game of spot the NPC who's slightly more murderous than the other NPCs. You get your eagle vision, you scan the crowds, you check the haystacks and rooftop perches. It's essentially a deadly game of hide and seek, except the hiders are trained killers who will absolutely stab you if you get too close without spotting them first. The irony is genuinely something. A game built entirely around flipping the assassin fantasy on its head gives you missions where the core challenge is just identifying people in a crowd. You can't set up elaborate ambushes. You can't use the full range of Shay's Templar toolkit in any meaningful way. You walk around squinting at civilians until eagle vision highlights someone suspicious, then you stab them. Which is functional, sure, but it's a far cry from the methodical hunter fantasy Rogue's entire identity promises. The community is split on these. Some players genuinely enjoy the role reversal of being on the other side of the assassin target dynamic. Others find them repetitive and shallow, arguing that find the hidden guy and stab him gets old after the third or fourth time regardless of the narrative framing. It's one of those mechanics that sounds brilliant in a design document and lands somewhere between decent and tedious in execution. I don't know what to tell you, but if you think hunting hidden assassins in crowds is underwhelming, wait until Unity asks you to solve riddles written by a 16th century astrologer with zero respect for your sanity. Assassin's Creed Unity. Here's the thing about Unity's Nostradamus enigmas. Every other entry on this list is bad because because it's lazy. Mindless busy work, copy-paste objectives, zero creativity. The Nostradamus enigmas have the opposite problem. They tried too hard. These were multi-part riddle sequences tied to zodiacal figures and classical references, where you had to decode cryptic clues and then physically locate specific environmental details scattered across revolutionary Paris. We're talking glyphs hidden on rooftops, symbols etched into church windows, architectural details that blended so seamlessly into their surroundings that you could be standing in the exact right spot and still miss them. The concept was genuinely ambitious. Ubisoft basically tried to build the Da Vinci Code as side content, and on paper, that sounds incredible. In practice, the solutions frequently demanded obscure historical knowledge or interpretive leaps so abstract that the game gave you almost zero guidance toward figuring them out. You'd read a riddle, stare at it for 20 minutes, convince yourself you understood it, run to what you thought was the right location, find nothing, run to 3 more locations, find nothing again, and then quietly open a browser tab. That became the actual gameplay loop. Read riddle, feel confused, Google it, and this wasn't a small percentage of players struggling with 1 or 2 tricky puzzles. Detailed community solution guides became essential resources for the vast majority of people attempting these enigmas, not supplementary aids, essential. When your puzzle content requires a walkthrough for basically everyone, the difficulty has exceeded what the design can support. But here's what makes this one almost sympathetic. The reception was genuinely mixed. Some players loved the ambition. They appreciated that Unity was trying to create intellectually demanding side content instead of another go here, kill this guy checklist. And honestly, that's a fair point. The Nostradamus enigmas represent one of the few times an Assassin's Creed game swung for the fences with its optional content. They just swung so hard they left the stadium, crossed 2 parking lots, and ended up in a completely different sport. But if you think overly ambitious puzzle design is frustrating, wait until Syndicate brings things crashing back down to earth with something far less sophisticated. Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Syndicate's cargo escort missions have a problem that goes beyond bad design. Most players didn't even know how to play them correctly, and that's not their fault. The premise is simple enough. You're tasked with protecting a merchant wagon as it rolls through Victorian London while gang members attack it from every direction. The wagon has a health bar, and it's about as durable as a wet napkin in a hurricane. Take too many hits and the mission fails. Standard escort fare, nothing revolutionary, but here's where it gets interesting. A huge chunk of the player base spent these missions riding on the back of the wagon, trying to fight off attackers from a stationary position while the cargo disintegrated around them. Picture Jacob Fry standing on top of a moving cart, getting pelted from all sides, swinging wildly at enemies he can barely reach while the health bar melts like butter on a stove. It's genuinely funny to watch. It's less funny to experience. The thing is, that's not even how you're supposed to do it. The actual strategy is to travel alongside the wagon on a separate horse and intercept attackers before they reach the cargo. You're meant to be a mobile defender, not a turret bolted to the roof, but the game never tells you this. There's no tutorial explaining the approach, no on-screen prompt suggesting you dismount, nothing. Players just assumed standing on the wagon was the play, because, well, you're defending the wagon. It makes intuitive sense, it's also completely wrong, and even when you figure out the correct method, it barely matters. Concentrated enemy attacks from multiple directions can overwhelm your defensive capacity regardless of positioning. You'll be handling 3 guys on the left flank and then hear the health bar chunk down because 2 more spawned on the right. At that point, it's not a skill issue, it's a luck issue. Did the enemies spawn in a manageable formation, or did the game decide to end your career today? The community's recommendation is refreshingly honest. Just don't do them. The frustration to reward ratio is so lopsided that completing cargo escorts feels less like accomplishment and more like surviving a natural disaster, which is, not ideal for optional content. But if you think unclear mission design is frustrating, wait until Origins asks you to fight actual gods on a weekly schedule. Assassin's Creed Origins. Origins changed everything. New combat system, RPG leveling, loot drops, skill trees. It was the moment Assassin's Creed stopped being an action game and started being an action RPG. And for the most part, that transition worked. But every transition has growing pains, and Trial of the Gods is where Origins stubbed its toe so hard it needed medical attention. Here's the setup. Trial of the Gods was a weekly rotating live service event where you fought giant divine boss battles against Egyptian gods. Anubis, Horus, Thoth, the whole pantheon. Normal difficulty capped at level 55, hard difficulty at level 58. Sounds cool on paper. Fight a god, get cool loot, feel powerful. But here's where it gets complicated. The fights rotated weekly, meaning you couldn't just attempt whichever god you wanted whenever you felt like it. You got one god per week. Miss your window? Come back in 7 days. Fail the fight because your build wasn't optimized? Cool, see you next Tuesday, literally. There's a difference between a boss fight being hard and time-gated. One is a challenge, the other is psychological warfare disguised as content, and the hard difficulty versions were even worse. Level 58 encounters basically required specific endgame weapon builds and fully optimized character stats. You couldn't just show up with whatever gear you'd been having fun with and expect to survive. The game essentially told you play exactly this way or don't play at all, which is a fantastic way to make casual players go, okay, I simply won't play at all then, which is exactly what happened. Huge portions of the player base just ignored trials entirely. The whole system functioned less like engaging optional content and more like a weekly homework assignment for people who'd already beaten the game. It was a build check, not a boss fight. And the worst part is, the concept was genuinely cool. Fighting Egyptian gods in an Assassin's Creed game should be a highlight, not a chore you schedule around like a dentist appointment. But if Origins introduced the live service growing pains, Odyssey grabbed those pains and cranked them up to 11. Assassin's Creed Odyssey doesn't have one bad side mission. It has a philosophy problem. And naval contracts are the perfect example of everything wrong with it. Here's the setup. The game hands you a massive Mediterranean map, arguably the biggest the franchise has ever produced, and then scatters naval contracts across every corner of it. Your job is to sail to a location, find a pirate ship or hostile fleet, blow it up, and collect your reward. Simple enough. Except the combat barely changes between encounters. You ram a ship, you fire arrows, you brace for impact, you board if you feel like it. That's the loop. And it's the same loop whether you're fighting pirates off the coast of Kepalonia or hunting down a fleet near Masara. The real killer isn't the combat itself, it's the travel time. Odyssey's map is so absurdly enormous that just sailing between contract locations feels like its own side mission. You spend 10 minutes crossing open water to reach a fight that lasts 2 minutes and plays out identically to the last 40 fights you've had. The ocean is beautiful, I'll give it that. But beauty stops being a reward somewhere around hour 60 when you're watching the same waves for the 9th consecutive voyage to nowhere. And here's where it gets worse. Naval contracts don't exist in a vacuum. They're one of dozens of repetitive optional activities crammed into a game already bursting at the seams with filler. You've got message boards generating infinite fetch quests, camps that reset, forts that blur together, and a level gating system that practically begs you to grind. Naval contracts are just another item on a checklist that never ends. The rewards? Not worth mentioning. Certainly not worth the hours of sailing required to collect them. The community figured this out fast. Veteran players started telling newcomers to abandon completionist runs entirely. Just do the story, skip the contracts, save yourself. Which is a pretty damning indictment of your optional content when the best advice is to pretend it doesn't exist. Naval contracts aren't the disease, they're the symptom. Odyssey's entire design philosophy was built on the idea that more content equals more value, and naval contracts are what happens when that logic goes unchecked. 40 identical naval fights spread across over 90 square miles of open sea, offering rewards that wouldn't justify a 5-minute detour, let alone an hour-long voyage. But if Odyssey exhausted you with quantity, wait until Valhalla finds a way to frustrate you with rocks. Assassin's Creed. Valhalla, you are Eivor. You are a Viking. You raid monasteries, you dual-wield axes, you headbutt people as a legitimate combat strategy, and you have literally fought gods. So naturally, the most frustrating thing in your entire journey across England is a pile of rocks. Cairn challenges asked players to stack stones of various sizes and weight distributions on top of each other to reach a specific height target. That's it. That's the mission. You're a Norse warrior who just got done burning down a Saxon fortress, and now the game wants you to play Jenga on a hillside like you're at a wellness retreat. Here's the thing. If the physics engine actually worked in a way that made sense, this might have been fine. A quirky little breather between raids. But the physics engine did not work in a way that made sense. Arrangements that looked perfectly stable would collapse the instant you let go. Meanwhile, configurations that looked like they were designed by a toddler having a meltdown would somehow hold. You'd place a flat rock on a wide base, textbook stacking, and it'd topple over like it was personally offended. Then you'd balance a boulder on its narrowest point at a 40-degree angle, and the game would go, yeah, that works. There was zero feedback on why your stack failed, no indication of weight distribution problems, no hint about center of gravity. just rocks falling over and you starting again, and again and again. The entire experience was pure trial and error, except the trial part taught you absolutely nothing, and the error part made you want to throw your controller into the ocean. The community response was predictable. Detailed placement guides became essential reading, with step-by-step instructions on exactly which rock to place where and at what angle. When your relaxing nature puzzle requires a walkthrough more detailed than most boss fight strategies, something has gone fundamentally wrong. But the real comedy is the mental image. A hulking Viking covered in war paint and wolf pelts, kneeling on a cliff top, delicately rotating a small stone with both hands while whispering, "Please don't fall for the 30th consecutive attempt." Somewhere, a Saxon village is burning. Eivor doesn't care. Eivor needs this cairn to be 3 inches taller. You'd be galloping across a gorgeous landscape, spot a mystery marker, ride over expecting a cool encounter, and instead find a circle of rocks waiting to waste 20 minutes of your life. Which is, not ideal. But if you think balancing rocks is a strange thing to be angry about, wait until you see what Mirage did with its side content. Assassin's Creed Mirage. Mirage was supposed to fix everything. That was the whole pitch. After years of bloated RPGs with 200-hour maps and loot systems that would make Diablo blush, Ubisoft looked players in the eye and said, "We hear you, we're going back to basics. Smaller world, tighter design, pure assassination gameplay." And to their credit, the core of Mirage actually delivered on that promise. The parkour felt sharp, the stealth had weight, and Baghdad was dense without being overwhelming. Then you found the Tales of Baghdad, and the cracks started showing. These were multi-part optional quest chains that combined exploration, combat, item retrieval from locked buildings, suspect tailing, and environmental detective work across the city. On paper, that sounds fantastic. In practice, it was a coin flip. Some tales genuinely delivered, offering real narrative depth and moments that made Baghdad feel lived in. Others left you standing in the middle of a market district with zero idea what the game actually wanted you to do next. The unclear objectives were the real killer. You'd get a quest that required some specific action to progress, but the game communicated this with all the clarity of a fortune cookie written in a language you don't speak. Players were pulling up walkthrough guides for optional side content in a game that was marketed as streamlined. That's not a great sign. But here's where it gets weird. Some of these tales included swimming sequences and underwater exploration segments, in a game about being a street-level assassin in 9th century Baghdad. Nothing says return to the franchise's stealth roots quite like paddling around looking for a submerged chest while your hidden blade rusts. Community reception landed exactly where you'd expect. Appreciation for the ambition of having substantial, story-driven optional quests sitting right alongside frustration that the execution stumbled so often. The quality gap between the best tales and the worst was enormous. One would have you unraveling a genuinely compelling mystery. The next would have you consulting a YouTube guide because the game forgot to tell you what a door looks like. And that's what makes Mirage the perfect ending to this list. Not because the Tales of Baghdad are the worst side missions in the franchise. They're not. They're not even close to flag collection or den defense or cairn stacking, but they represent something almost sadder. Mirage was the conscious course correction. The deliberate attempt to strip away the bloat and get back to what made Assassin's Creed work. And even then, even with every advantage of hindsight and 16 years of player feedback, the optional content still stumbled. 13 games, 16 years. And the franchise is still figuring out how to make side missions that people actually want to play. I don't know what to tell you. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.